War films aren't always at the top of my list to check out, even though they're typically very engaging. And that being said, I decided to check out The Forgotten Battle on Netflix, so was it worth my time? A British glider pilot, a Dutch boy fighting on the German side, and a Dutch female resistance member all end up involved in the Battle of the Schelde. Their choices differ, but their goal is the same: freedom. So this is inspired by true events. In November of 1944, the Allied forces are pushing back the Nazis, and they're liberating towns, cities, and countries that have been overrun. Now, the port city of Antwerp is a vital location, but even though it's liberated, the path to Antwerp is still occupied, cutting off any Allied movements and supplies. The Forgotten Battle chronicles the events of how the Nazis were ultimately defeated, but through the unique perspectives of three different individuals. We watch a young Dutch woman who becomes involved in the resistance more out of happenstance and necessity than by choice. There's a young man who's Dutch, but he's fighting for the Nazis. And then finally, a British glider pilot who finds himself on the very wrong side of the country. I really enjoyed the three different perspectives because we're watching pretty much the same series of events that culminate to this battle, but they intertwine in unexpected ways. So this being a war movie, we do expect to see some fighting. And especially since the word battle is in the title, there definitely should be at least one, right? And this is a little different of a war movie in the fact that while there is some action and some fighting, the majority of it is saved until the final act of the film. Now, everything up until that point is used to not only envelop us in the story, but also work to really connect us to the characters. The editing in this is done effectively because all of the scenes and points of view flow seamlessly together, building out a very cohesive narrative. And I didn't ever feel like I was trying to play catch up with some story elements or character arcs. And all three of the main characters are understated in their performances. I mean, they're not overly gregarious or demonstrative, even though at times they do get rightfully emotional. And there are several times where I was yelling at the characters, and not just the main three, because of the choices and decisions that were being contemplated. One character believes that they have influence or clout in a situation where they never did. I mean, it's obvious to us as the audience, but the desperation clouds their judgment, which then propels more bad things further. And then there's another time where soldiers are continually hesitating, and that just doesn't totally end well. The atmosphere that is created in this is cold and foreboding. And not only because it's wartime and the threat of death lies around every corner, but also because of the environments themselves. I mean, portions of the landscape that the pilot has to traverse are just absolutely flooded. And then when that is combined with the drab color palettes and the gray skies, the whole production just has a melancholy to it. And I love how much the environment is a character in this, especially in the pilot's story arc. It's one more daunting foe that has to be overcome in his mission, and it's just ever present. There are some story progressions that I think are obvious, but this ends up adding to the dread more than anything. I mean, when we watch a character make a decision, we can see where the outcome is going to lead, even if they can't, which then creates some good apprehension as the sequence unfolds. This also causes some very good story tension, which at times put me at the edge of my seat. As with most war films, this one is long as well. And this is 2 hours and 7 minutes, and they managed to fit a lot of storytelling into that time frame. Now, there were a couple of points that felt a little drawn out, but they were an artistic choice, showing us the weight of emotion that somebody was experiencing. I do think one portion of the pilot's arc, though, could have been completely removed, because while it caused some intrigue and tension at the beginning of the story, ultimately, it was just never utilized for anything that moved the narrative forward. So to cut that portion entirely wouldn't have had an impact on the story, or really the emotions that we feel for the pilot. As we get to the battle at the end of the film, there is a culmination of tension and emotions. And we as the audience have all of the information, but the characters don't, so when they move into action, there is this great sense of trepidation. And while the battle sequences are violent, they're not gratuitous or overly bloody. I mean, the fighting is very intense, and the way the entire sequence is choreographed and edited build up some great excitement. I think at times I would have liked to have seen some wider shots of the action so that we could just see more of the overall context, but still, what we do get is immersive. It also lasts for quite a bit, so that was satisfying. I enjoyed how the film concludes. There's a quiet sadness that is also a little devastating, and it's weird to think how sucked into the main characters we can become. They're each sympathetic in their own ways. I mean, even the Dutch young man who's fighting for the Nazis. The way the characters create looks and perform interactions really help to endear them to us, even when they're deeply flawed. Overall, I really enjoyed this. The storytelling was accomplished well, tying together three separate viewpoints to tell a larger story. And I became enveloped in the characters and fearful for their well-being. While the action wasn't a constant presence, when it was there, it immersed me in the horror and dread of battle. I do feel that some of the story could be cut down, not only to make the narrative move more efficiently, but also to remove unnecessary story portions that ultimately don't serve the narrative purpose. But when all is said and done, I liked that I learned something new. I'd never heard about this battle, which is why the title of the movie is so fitting. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and a ton of violence. I give The Forgotten Battle 4 out of 5 couches. What's one of your favorite war stories? Now, this one really made me want to rewatch Band of Brothers, but I'd love to hear what you like in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.